Today we are covering Principle 5 of intuitive eating, which is discovering the satisfaction factor. So, for people who've struggled on and off with dieting throughout their whole lives, or for people who are struggling with an eating disorder, it can feel really scary to think about eating for reasons of pleasure or satisfaction. For a lot of us, the rabbit hole of food rules can go so deep that we can't conceive of eating for a reason other than nutrition or calories or health or fuel. And so it becomes something that if we're eating for pleasure or enjoyment, we actually feel bad about ourselves. We feel like we have to punish ourselves or compensate for it somehow. But if you've been working on the principles of intuitive eating and you've decided to ditch diet culture, at least for the moment, if you're practicing honoring hunger and listening to your hunger and fullness cues, and if you are working on some consistent timed eating to help you get on a schedule of, about 3 meals a day and a couple snacks, you might find that you're actually able to access eating for pleasure. And so I wanted to give you a couple practices or exercises to start going a little bit more deeply into that work so that you can make the most out of your intuitive eating journey in Principle 5. So one of the first places that I start with my clients is to ask them, what do you like to eat? And this can be a really, really hard question to answer. So some of the recommendations I have in exploring, really, what meals do you enjoy and what do you gravitate towards? I usually ask about family meals or meals from childhood or takeout meals. Where do you like to go? Where are the places, the restaurants or other food establishments that you really enjoy ordering from? If you are really stuck in an eating disorder, what are those things on the menu that you fantasize about ordering or you fixate on ordering and would love to give yourself permission to eat that, but then that eating disorder thought overrides you and says, no, we have to eat this. So the first piece of discovering satisfaction is to give yourself permission to dream a little bit and remember some of the meals that you've had that have brought you true joy in your life. And so that is the first step, is really exploring that and thinking about that as a place where maybe over time you can start to incorporate some of those meals a little bit more regularly into your weekday cooking or maybe just into your weekends. The second step to start thinking about satisfaction in eating is to really slow down your experience of eating. And this is what we all colloquially know as mindful eating, right? So we may not be perfect about this every time, and I don't think we need to do this for every meal, but to take some occasions where you're enjoying a meal or having a snack and allowing yourself to be present with it for the moment and to notice what is the environment that you're eating in. What do you think or notice about the food that you're eating? What is the speed with which you are eating? Do you find yourself chewing very rapidly? Do you find yourself chewing not a whole lot? Do you find yourself pushing food around on the plate and not really taking bites because you're distracted? What's the emotional state that you're eating in? Are you feeling pressured? Are you feeling disengaged? Are you feeling agitated or anxious? These are all ways that we can start to tune into the moment of mealtime and really get a read on how our environment and our thinking and our feeling can affect the way that we eat. So that would be the next piece to have you work on. Once you're eating more mindfully, the next place to take this is to use all of your tasting palette. What are you noticing about the actual food that you're eating? If we could dive into that for the moment, what do you notice about flavors, about textures, about colors? What do you notice about certainly the food temperature? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it room temperature because it wasn't quite stored correctly? Do you find that you really enjoy dense, moist foods? Do you find that you really like airy, light, crispy foods? Does this particular food remind you of another food experience that you've had? Really considering and exploring the different qualities of foods that you like to eat and what brings you genuine pleasure versus sometimes when we eat, we're just kind of getting through the meal, right? We can't necessarily always have a meal that's going to tick every box on our list. Sometimes we really genuinely are just eating for nourishment and to get through the day. But it can be really important and liberating to start exploring what your authentic food preferences are. So start tuning into that a little bit more too. Step 4 in discovering the satisfaction of food is really getting honed on the question of, does this still taste good? And if you're not doing the work in intuitive eating, this is going to be a really challenging step for you. Part of getting to a really close idea of when a food stops tasting good for you has to do with nourishing your body adequately throughout the day. If we come to a meal 6 or 7 hours from our last meal, many of us are going to be extremely hungry, or if not extremely hungry, extremely distracted, really kind of not able to take in the experience of the food. And so it becomes very, very hard to notice when we get to a point where the food doesn't taste good. We kind of just eat in that, mindless rote way. And a lot of times biologically, we're being driven by appetite. Your metabolism has been cranking all day, and if you haven't eaten enough food, your biology is just going to get you to keep eating that food because you need it to keep your metabolism up. So this is called the sensory specific satiety cue. And so if you are able to take a moment to practice either with a snack or with a particular meal, you really want to hone into each bite of food that you're taking and really checking in with yourself to say, does this still taste good? And what you might find is that you might be surprised at the point at which the food stops tasting good to you, but you actually still feel some kind of appetite and keep eating. We essentially experience food with diminishing returns. It tends to taste really, really good when we start eating, in part because our biology needs us to eat that food. And then the more nourished we become through that meal, the more adequate calories we take in, usually food starts tasting less and less good, I guess, so to speak. So that's something to really start practicing, is asking yourself, does this still taste good? If it does at the end of the meal, awesome. It was a great meal. But you might find that there are some times where you can detect that actually, this kind of just tastes okay. And it's okay to stop eating at that point. And that leads us to the last exercise to start exploring this principle, which is you do not have to finish food that you do not like. And this is a point of contention with many of my clients. We all have really strong reasons for eating or finishing food that doesn't necessarily taste good to us anymore. Sometimes, like I said, it's just the food that's in front of us and we have to eat it to get through the meal and stay nourished until the next meal. That I totally understand. There are also some times where we maybe are sunken in to the food that's in front of us and feeling like we have to finish it for other reasons, environmental reasons, financial reasons, being in the company of other people that may feel like they're pressuring you in some way to finish a particular food or have a particular response to a food. And this is where I really would encourage you to cultivate some boundaries around food. So for example, if you order a latte or a smoothie that's, expensive, you get a lot of add-ins, it's like maybe $6 or $7, or you sprung for a fancy place, and you take a few sips and you don't really like it. You do not have to finish that, and you don't have to feel like a bad person for not finishing it. One of the ways I help clients reframe this is to think about the monetary investment for that particular food as an investment in the experience itself. So it's not necessarily that you're paying $6 or $7 or $8 for that beverage. It's that you are paying for the new experience, and not all experiences are going to work out for us. Sometimes they just kind of tank and we get it wrong, and it doesn't mean that you actually have to eat food that you don't like. You can certainly order it again, or if you're kind of out of cash or that you budgeted for that situation, you might have to wait until you get home and find something more nourishing and satisfying there. But work on boundaries and work on challenging yourself to not eat food that you don't like, and give yourself permission to go get something else if it's not satisfying. So I hope some of these exercises help you, bring you closer into discovering the satisfaction factor with food. And I look forward to hearing about your favorite foods in the comments.